7-4, how individual securities affect portfolio risk. The risk of a well-diversified portfolio depends on the market risk of the securities included in the portfolio. Specific risk is not important in a well-diversified portfolio. Only market risk is important. An individual stock's market risk is called its beta. Stocks with high standard deviations tend to have high betas, but not always. Some stocks have high standard deviations due to high specific risk, but low betas due to low market risk. If a stock has high risk, that is high standard deviation, and high return, but low market risk, that is low beta, it can be a great addition to a portfolio. We have to be able to calculate the beta of a particular stock. So let's go ahead and calculate the beta of Apple Inc. We take 10 years worth of return data, 2012 to 2021, 31%, 5%, 38%, negative 5%. We get the average return, which is 32%. We find the difference between the expected return and the actual return for each year and square that to get our variance numbers. We total up our variance, divide by 9 to get 1,065 percentage squared variance. Take the square to that to get our 33% standard deviation. We repeat the process for the S&P 500. The S&P 500 stands as a proxy for the U.S. stock market. The S&P 500 is an index that tracks the performance of 500 blue chip stocks that trade on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. The S&P 500 index stands as a proxy for the performance of the U.S. stock market. We do exactly the same calculations. We get the growth rates for each year, find out there's an average growth rate over the 10-year period from 2012 to 2021 of 14.84%. We then take the difference for each year between the expected return and the actual return, get the variance, divide by 9, get the average variance, then from there calculate the standard deviation. So we see that 10-year S&P average return or growth rate was 14.84% and the standard deviation was 12%. Lower than that for Apple Inc. From here, we have two ways to calculate beta. One of the great principles of math is something called duality. We can take two seemingly separate calculations and theories and ideas, and they yield the same result. Duality. The first approach we'll take is what's called a line of best fit, or you might have heard it as a regression line or a linear regression. Here's the idea. We'll plot the growth rates for the S&P 500 on the x-axis, the growth rates for Apple Inc. on the y-axis. We will get 10 ordered pairs, and we will create a line of best fit for those 10 ordered pairs using least squares regression. The slope of that line will be the beta of Apple Inc. stock. And the beta turns out to be 1.53. There's no units on the beta there. It's just a ratio between the growth rates on the S&P 500 and the growth rates on Apple Inc. What does this beta of 1.53 tell us, or 1.53 times tell us? It tells us that for a 1% improvement in the S&P 500, you'll get a 1.53% improvement in Apple Inc. And for a fall of 1% on the S&P 500 to get a fall of 1.53% for Apple Inc. There is another way to calculate beta. I can take, and you look at the calculation there on the right, it says the beta of Apple is going to be the covariance of Apple with the S&P 500. Sigma sub AM stands for sigma Apple market. So that's the covariance of the Apple and S&P 500 divided by the variance of the S&P 500, or the variance of the market. And that also results, surprisingly, in 1.53 times. We need to be able to calculate beta both ways. Let's look at a visual representation of calculating beta the first way. We see a chart of the data we just looked at. There are 10 ordered pairs. For each of the years, there's going to be a growth rate in the S&P 500, that's on the x-axis, and a growth rate in Apple Inc. stock, that's going to be on the y-axis. You see that these orders pairs are positively correlated. We can see that there's some modest correlation. We can certainly come up with a line of best fit or a least squares regression line. This can be done very easily in Excel. You can also do it on a standard TI-84 plus CE graphing calculator. You can do the calculation by hand using basic statistics, or you can do the calculation by hand using linear algebra. Here, this graph comes directly from an Excel spreadsheet. We noticed from the line to best fit that there's a slope on that line of 1.53 times. What does that say to us again? That tells us if we have an increase in the market in a given year of 1%, there will be a 1.53% increase in Apple Inc. Basically, Apple Inc. will move at a ratio of 1.53 times whatever happens to the S&P 500, either in the positive direction or in the negative direction, indicating that the market risk of Apple Inc. is 1.53 times the market risk of the market. Remember, beta only applies for a well-diversified portfolio. In other words, we can only really talk meaningfully about Apple Inc.'s beta when Apple is being viewed as part of a well-diversified portfolio where the specific risk of the individual stocks has been eliminated and the only contribution of each of the stocks is their market risk. Let's do the same thing. Let's calculate the beta of Tesla Inc. Here we're going to need data on Tesla Inc. and data on the market, which our proxy is the S&P 500. What do we do here again? Well, we need to calculate. We're going to either need to compare the growth rates on a chart, create a scatter plot of the 10 ordered pairs, and get the slope of the line of best fit to get the beta, or we're going to calculate the standard deviation of Tesla, the standard deviation of S&P 500, also calculate the covariance between Tesla and the S&P 500, and take the covariance of Tesla and the market over the variance of the market. Let's go ahead and look at the line of best fit again. Here's the scatter plot of data. Along the independent axis, we have S&P 500 annual returns. Along the dependent axis, we have Tesla Inc.'s annual returns. There are 10 ordered pairs. There's positive correlation, some correlation. You can certainly come up with a line of best fit, a least squared regressions line. This was done in Excel, and Excel came up with a least squared regression line with a slope of 5.26. What does this mean? This means that Tesla is much riskier than the S&P 500 purely in terms of market risk. Right? And if Tesla is within a well-diversified portfolio, so that most of the specific risks of the individual stocks has been eliminated, and Tesla is only bringing its market risk to that portfolio, well, in that case, we could say that Tesla Inc. Is 5.26 times more sensitive to changes than the S&P 500. In other words, if S&P 500 fell 1% tomorrow, then in theory, Tesla Inc. would fall 5.26% tomorrow, right? Always in that ratio, a unitless ratio, that is beta, 5.26 in this case. All right, the last question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we calculate the beta of a portfolio. Let's say we come up with a well-diversified portfolio of 20 or more stocks. We've eliminated virtually all of the specific risk, and there'd just be market risk in this portfolio. Well then, in that case, we could say, I know what the beta is of each of the stocks. I could calculate that just like we did for Apple or Tesla earlier. But how could I calculate the beta of the overall portfolio? Easy. Here we just take a weighted arithmetic average of the betas of all the stocks in our portfolio. And that's all we have to do. So let's say we only had 2 stocks in this portfolio, Tesla and Apple. But let's say hypothetically somehow all the specific risk has been eliminated. It won't be with just 2 stocks. But for a simple case here, I'm pretending that we're dealing with a well-diversified portfolio. In this case, just a simple weighted average, 39% of Apple's beta plus 61% of Tesla's beta will get you a beta for the portfolio of 3.79 times. What is this saying? Is this portfolio more or less risky than the stock market? It's more risky than the stock market. The U.S. stock market, as measured by the S&P 500, would have a market risk of 1, a beta of 1. This portfolio has a beta of 3.79. In other words, it's 3.7 times more risky in terms of market risk than the market portfolio. Specifically, what I mean is, again, if you have a 1% rise in the market portfolio, you'll have a 3.79% rise in this portfolio consisting of Apple and Tesla. All right, you need to be able to calculate betas for individual stocks and the portfolio beta for a well-diversified portfolio.